Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for coming along, for joining us. This is the second part of the Array Festival, our digital online festival. And so thanks for. The whole point of the Array Festival is to really shine a light on the digital and tech sector for Lancaster and the city region, so Lancaster, Morecambe, and what we've got going on in and around this area. So I'm really, really pleased that today I've got the chance to have a good chat, a good natter with someone who's become somebody I know in business, but also a bit of a pal over the last few weeks, is Ruth Wilkinson, who has the Consult Centre in Morecambe. Ruth is probably one of the most well-known, I think, kind of entrepreneurs in the region. She's really popular across Lancaster and Morecambe, delivering lots of training. Has a digital and social media PR business, working with SMEs across the region to support them with producing content and training and upskilling people on how to engage with potential customers. So I'm going to just kick straight in with some questions for you, Ruth. So thanks for coming along.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
Smashing. Okay. So first of all, then, we are in the strangest of the times. How's it going? How's the Consult Centre getting along with lockdown and COVID-19?
It's I think it would be untrue if I said we didn't have to adjust, and that's taken a little bit of time initially. But because we're quite an online business and we're quite very much digital business, a lot of our things in terms of our technologies and softwares were fine. So that hasn't really impacted us to that degree. I think what has impacted us is we're a really close team, so we work really closely together, have a lot of time with each other. So moving all of that to Zoom, so we're having daily updates with me and the rest of the team, and everybody sharing ideas. That's quite different for us because it's not our culture. Normally, we're very much kind of in each other's pockets all the time. And from a client point of view, it's created more work in some ways because we went out very early on and dedicated and said we would do more for our clients during this time to make sure that they were assured and they were comfortable that we were keeping all the feeds going. So we've done more probably than we normally would do. And then we've had some clients where it's impacted them hugely, their themselves, the teams, their client base. So it's about being, it's been hard work, but it's also about being sensitive that it's not been as hard a work for us as it has been for a lot of other businesses, actually.
And just quickly, what sort of things does the Consult Centre in terms of that digital PR space? What sort of services do you guys offer? What sort of things do you do?
Oh, okay. So at the moment, we have a building which is centrally located on the prom. So we have just the most amazing views across the beach and the bay, which we're really blessed to have. So we're not able to work in there at the moment. So ordinarily, we'd be offering hot desking and people can come and hire the meeting rooms and private rooms and that kind of thing. But of course, that's no longer in operation. But the other two arms of our the three arms of our business are. So I do a lot of coaching, business coaching. So I'm a qualified coach and I do some lecturing at University of Cumbria and some at Lancaster Open College. That's all moved online, so that's not really changed in terms of delivery. So that part remains the same. My coaching and private coaching has moved online, so a slight difference, but it's delivered and it's delivered, continue to deliver. And then the real big area of our business is social media, and whether we're training it, whether we're managing somebody else's, whether they're optimizing their pages. So we spend a lot of time doing content, so graphic content, video, podcast, and pictorial text content. We manage people's accounts for them across all the platforms, and that's continued.
Okay. So, Ruth, your background is what I would call a really corporate background. You work for some large organisations. You've worked at BT, AXA, Daisy Group, a real kind of structured, structured career, and then you've gone into to owning your own business. How have you found that career, those experiences of your career have kind of prepared you for what life is like now as a business owner, as an entrepreneur?
It's a really good question, actually, because I've been quite fortunate. So I have had a corporate career, but I also started a business that I then sold to Daisy Group. So that was, I kind of started a business and then I sold out to them and then I joined them as part of their leadership board. So that was probably a bit of both worlds, really. How has it prepared me? I think a lot of it is about relationship. So, in all of those jobs, whether I was running the contact centres, whether I was running their sales divisions, whether I was doing the learning and development, it was always about relationships. So whether I had internal stakeholders, they were still customers, or whether I had external customers. So from my point of view, I think it's over a period of time, you hone your skills, you hone your discipline, you manage expectation. But as cheesy as it might sound, you put the customer at the heart of everything that you do, and that's been really, really important for me. And not over-promising, not doing all the things that you hear happening, and trying to forge very long-term relationships. So that's kind of very much our learning that we've taken into, or I've taken into, creating the business.
And you talked about the relationships there. There's a lot, it's kind of a really successful career there, and relationships, I must agree, a really important part. Was that something that you were always conscious of when you were in those roles? Were you conscious of how you built relationships, or did you just kind of get on with it?
Well, I think probably when I was younger, I wasn't as conscious. I don't think. I think as I matured in my career and went from job to job, I always knew that. I mean, I didn't really, I moved probably every kind of 5-6 years in those kind of roles. But I knew that my success quickly, when I first joined the business, was definitely based on the relationship build. It was definitely based on understanding where I sat in that organisation, where everybody else sat in relation to that, what I had to deliver to them, what they were delivering to somebody else, when someone was relying on me, and then making really key relationships. So forging proper relationships with people that are as forgiving as they are challenging, so that if honestly, you can cock up, but you can also know that person, because you've got a relationship, because you've looked after them, because you've done things with them, then there's a bit more of of honesty and transparency in the relationships. And it's something that I told, certainly when I'm working with social media clients or my coaching clients, is you can't sell to people all of the time. You have to have some basis of trust and credibility and authenticity about you, and that comes from relationships.
I imagine that's important as well when you're sort of talking about managing social media for companies, because it mustn't always be plain sailing. It mustn't. A lot of companies must have a tendency to go in and say, this is going to be brilliant all the time, and this is going to do this, and of course the reality must be totally different.
Yeah, it can be, but if we, one of the things that we do a lot is that we sounds ridiculous. We interview our own customers, because right. we're their voice. So if we're going out using language or tone or text that people who know them know it's not them, it's going to be a failure point in our service to them. So we regularly interview our clients, and we interview our clients' clients for why they've become involved with them, so that when we are doing that work, we're doing that with their voice rather than with our voice. So, which is quite eye-opening for a lot of clients, because they don't necessarily think that's going to be the depth of relationship that we get into with them. But we're carrying their brand, and it's a massive responsibility.
It's really, real depth there you're going into with clients. Just a quick note to everyone who's watching, or who's logged in, or maybe on the Facebook Live. Please do use the chat function if you'd like to ask any questions. And if anyone wants to ask any questions via Facebook Live, then please go ahead and do so. 3 years now, Consult Centre been going.
Yeah.
What was it that kind of made you take that transition and that jump from corporate career to self-employment to entrepreneurial sort of entrepreneurship?
Yeah, I've been really lucky, as I said before, that a lot of the businesses I've worked with, I've had really good line management, and they've allowed me and they've trusted me to make lots of decisions. So I actually had quite an entrepreneurial role a lot of the time inside of a very large corporate business. I was allowed to make those decisions, and I had to stand by them nonetheless if they didn't work, but I was able to do that. And I think that kind of lights a bit of a fire in your belly where you think, right, okay, I like this idea, I like that accountability, I like that kind of challenge. And also knowing when you're standing in somebody else's way. So when you've been in the business for a period of time and you think, okay, am I achieving what I wanted to? Am I achieving what the business wanted me to? Is my place here more about my own ego now, or is it about the business? And actually, do I need to go and do that somewhere else? If I'm being really honest. And whatever business I've been in, it comes down to the same stuff. Do what you say you're going to do, deliver it when you say you're going to deliver it. Be really honest.
Sometimes that's the hardest things to do.
I know, and sometimes it's really hard to ring someone and say, "I'm really sorry, we cocked up." And I think the feedback that we get from our clients is that's the bit they like. That's the bit that they feel more assured about. So coming back to that, why did I move out into that entrepreneurial world? I don't necessarily think the behaviours are all that different. I think the risk is very different, but I think the ethos, the behaviours, and your moral kind of ethical standpoint, if you've got that, you've got it anyway. I think it's just a case of you can really take it to a higher level when you're not constrained by what an organisation wants. You're able to be your organisation. I think that makes it more exciting. But like I say, it also comes with lots of risk. And I think I was just at a point where I thought I am comfortable. I'm never thrilled, but I'm comfortable to take the risk. Yeah.
Great. You've obviously managed lots of teams in what you do. You've now kind of got to a point with your own business that you employ staff. And I think for anybody watching, anyone who's kind of interested in either has started a business or is interested in a business, that point at which you employ staff that you take people on is a bit of a kind of seminal moment. I think a bit of a benchmark, especially those first people. And for a lot of people, that can be quite challenging.
Yeah.
So, how did you approach taking on hiring for the first time?
It's a really good question because I was always going to kind of like, when I get to this point, I need to take somebody else on. When I get to this point, I need to take somebody else on. And actually, I had to quite strict myself about, right, okay, you're at that point now. And I think what pushes it.
Well, when you say a point, was that what was? How did you define that point? Was it a time thing? Was it a workload? Was it a financial thing?
Yeah. So I think what it was for me was if I thought there was potential failure, the minute I thought that the whole thing I built my relationship on was at risk because I was doing too much and was going to drop something, I just didn't want to get to that point. So we wrote some quite novel kind of job descriptions where we're really honest and say, we'd love you to come and join our team, and we tell them what an average day is like and all that kind of stuff. And then we invite people to come in and interview us and spend time with us because we might like them, but they might not like us. So we do an awful lot of kind of come and put us to the test. And sometimes I don't interview potential candidates. I let my team do it because they need to work with them. So I let them take some agency in terms of making the choices, and then they stand by those choices because it's no point having a team of people if I haven't empowered those people to make those decisions. And empowered is used a bit too flippantly and frequently, but it's true in terms of, do they all agree and do we have that consensus? Because it's a movement of people. It's not just me directing somebody. It's all of us taking that load and making sure that we're all equipped to be able to do that. And if they've taken part of that recruitment process, then they also trust that person. So it allows that team bond to develop at a more accelerated rate, I suppose. That's certainly the hope, anyway.
And how your staff team coping with kind of being locked down now? Has that sort of changed at all, or are they fine? Or
yeah, I mean, I've got some that are parents and they've got children at home and they're trying to homeschool and they're trying to do the work, and they've kind of set up an office somewhere, and that doesn't necessarily always be in a quiet space. And so we've just kind of gone out to them, and those people that work part-time, we've just said, work the hours you want, work the hours when it suits you and you're not having to take time away from your children. So we've been very flexible in that sense because we don't mind. We'd rather than be able to do the work when they want to do it. That's how you get the good work. But yes, like I said earlier, because we're such a close team, I think we're all missing that. We normally go for a walk on the prom together. We normally sit and have a coffee around the table or all have a bit of a chit chat. So those things are a bit different. We haven't lost. We're just very conscious not to lose that Zoom call that you have for half an hour where no one mentions work. We just check how everybody is, and to try and keep that bond as strong as it is.
I suspect that's quite important, making sure that there's, work doesn't just give us that formal, the job, the pay, but it's those relationships that you build that are really important.
Absolutely.
You talked about going for little walks down the prom there. There are a few places in the world as nice to go for little walks.
The only place in the world, only place.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel as a local, as someone from the region, born and brought up in Lancaster, but now live in Heysham, come over to this side of it. I feel like we're starting to build something in Morecambe. I feel like there's the turning of the tide. It feels more positive. And I've always kind of felt it's a great place to start a business, but you've obviously gone and done that.
Yeah.
So what do you think is so great about Morecambe at the moment, and why is it a great place to get going?
Because I feel, well, Morecambe community is a wonderful community anyway, and I'm not suggesting anywhere else isn't, by the way, either. Everywhere's got their own kind of view of their community, but a supportive, open community is lovely here, both as a personal and a business community. I think the people that are in business in Morecambe, a lot of them have been in businesses a long time, or they've got family businesses, so they've seen all those different changes. They've faced lots of challenge, and they're really quite resilient. Actually, I probably don't realise how resilient they are. So that they offer a massive amount of wisdom. So if you kind of speak to people that are in business in Morecambe, you cannot get out of a conversation without learning something. You absolutely cannot get out of a conversation without learning something that helps you. And I think you look at the communities like Morecambe Bid, where they're really trying to deliver change into Morecambe and support the business community. And just the wealth of experience that you've got there. I just think that Morecambe is a place where maybe it's known for the tourism first and maybe for business second, but there are lots of micro businesses. There's lots of businesses in Morecambe. There could be a lot more, but there are a lot there. I just probably think there's an element of people don't boast about it and they don't necessarily publicise it. I think that's the one thing that holds it back. I think that everybody's got something to be proud of if they've got a business in Morecambe. Definitely.
And dare I say, what's the feeling like around Eden? Are people excited? Do you think that'll help to really boost that sort of local supply chain and stuff? And
I think it will. I think there's two approaches to Eden, and I've got to be sensitive around how I kind of talk about this, because Eden brings massive possibilities and massive opportunity. And there's lots of people that are already kind of forecasting for that and building it into the plans and doing a strategy around it and making sure they're well positioned. But then there are other businesses, very independent businesses, that are understandably nervous and anxious about it. Will it just bust people in? They turn up, they spend the money there, and will it bust them back out again? And how do they need to adapt and change their business to make sure that they're not left on the periphery of that whole expansion?
Yeah.
So I think that's really key, and I think there's a few things that as a community and a council and a local government that there's stuff we can be doing with that. I know Lancaster and Morecambe College are doing a huge amount of work to help that, and the bid's also helping too. I think Lancaster University are also involved, and Cumbria. So there is some activity happening, but maybe something that needs to kind of really bolster that going forward. And then the other thing is the skill is who's available in the local population, who's at the right school age leave, who's returning to work after having a break. Where do we maximise that skill, and what do we do with that? And I think that's the stage 2 of Eden, because it would be fantastic, wouldn't it, if those local people, that local community, were employed by that venture, which then meant that they took something from Eden, quite apart from the fact it was here, but also it was changing their lives, and then that money is going into the local economy in more ways than one, because that spend goes back in. So I think it's got the potential to really make a difference, but I think it needs to be done sensitively and in a really nice guided way to help people that aren't quite as ready to shift, to help them to understand and make those decisions so that we can maximise for everybody, not just for a few.
You just mentioned there actually something that caught my ear that you said then, and this is something I've kind of spoken to a few people about over the last few weeks, and you and I have had kind of conversations of this ilk. What I wanted to ask, Ruth, was in terms of digital, it's such an important part of business now. You face with this all the time. How good, bearing in mind we have things like Eden on the horizon, how good are we in the region at digital skills? How have we got it right?
Providing them.
Pardon?
Providing them.
Just generally, have we got the people? Have we got the staff ready for some of those digital skills?
I think my experience has been not really. You know, we when we're recruiting people, are recruiting them on probably their own personal attributes and behaviours, and then we're giving them those skills, which is a lot of investment. I mean, I mentioned Lancaster and Wilkinson College before. They are trying to up their game to make sure, and they've done a lot of really good work already. But I mean, I know me and you have spoken about this, so it's probably not news to you. But and one of the things I was thrilled to hear about with some of the plans you might have is that it needs its own focus, it needs its own drive, it needs to be understood as an industry of its own, rather than this thing that kind of bolts on to the side of another industry, because it's a profession and it's an industry. It's a really valuable one, and some businesses can succeed or not based upon what the digital footprint is and how able they are to harness all that available media. I don't think necessarily there's a lot of sharing happening in that sense, or a particular plan to drive what is going to be the next me, you, Nick, whoever it might be that's coming up in that sense. So I think we're probably not where we should be for the future plan.
I think there's some work to do, isn't there? There's definitely kind of work to do.
Yeah.
Grand. So I want to kind of move us on a little bit now from kind of talking about marketing and the creative app to one of your areas of expertise, which is around social media and the work that you do supporting companies. So I'm guessing we've got some people who are watching this and people who might watch this in future interested to know about social media and how to use it. So thinking about someone who's getting started in social media and communicating digitally, what do you think are the integral channels that businesses should be using to communicate through social, through digital?
It's a really difficult question to give specifics per business, because a lot of it depends on, I suppose that's my answer, a lot of it depends on the business. So,
of course,
one of the things that we talk about with our clients often is around who is your customer. And there's normally about 8 or 9 variants of who your customer is. So, they're almost like the classic, here's my client avatar that says age range, who they are, where they shop, who they buy, what they buy, what their interests are and why they want your product. And we do an awful lot of that work. And often, sometimes it's the first time most clients have had the opportunity to sit and really think about it. One of the questions then is, well, if that's who they are now, who are they next year? And who are they the year after that? And only when we've really understood that do we then go back to them and say, okay, we believe that your primary channels are, and then we will go through those channels. So, a LinkedIn client would be very different potentially to an Instagram profile user. So it's around, well, then if I want to hit all of those platforms and profiles, does my messaging and communication need to change? Does my tone of my messaging change? If I'm using MailChimp, if I'm mainly doing some other form of communication, how am I doing that? And also, what do you want as a response? What do you want as the return? Because a lot of people put a lot of effort into doing stuff, but don't really know when they've been successful. So what does success look like? What are your measures? What are your key metrics? And often we spend more time in the investment phase, so that the other things we then choose after that become more obvious in terms of, oh, this is for client 4 and it needs to go on, LinkedIn. And so we take a very bespoke approach when we do that.
So you mentioned kind of a period of kind of establishing a customer or what a customer should look like, or the different types of customer. Mm-hmm. What else do you kind of talk about? What else do you formulate to create a strategy and a plan with the business? What else should come in there?
I think a lot of it is around branding, a lot of it is around, is it uniformed? Yeah. Do they have that strategy? Do they have a print strategy, a digital strategy? Do they have a social? So does it all look and feel the same? Would it resonate if a client hit upon a profile somewhere else and do all those things, look and have the same credibility and quality? You've also then got to think about what's the product, and is that product specific? Are you educating people first about something before you're trying to sell to them? Do you need blog platforms? So it's very much around, is video your media for your particular group? Is actually podcasting, is an ebook? There's so many variants of that people get very overwhelmed, and they also start with real kind of gusto into doing it and then just can't keep it up. So a lot of that is around, how much time are you really going to dedicate to this, and what's minimum and what's maximum, and having all of that as a strategy beforehand, and then being able to understand if that strategy is working and when they have to interrupt it and move it and change it. So and it is only one part of the business. That PR and that awareness is only one part of the business. So how do we then work to complement them in their other activities? Are we actually making that message with better clarity, or are we interrupting the flow of messaging going elsewhere? Because you'll see that happen quite a bit. People overstep each other and things are happening differently. Do they have a brand look and feel? Do all their pictorials and their graphics look the same? If we're going to do photo shots, do they have a certain look and feel? Do they have a certain filter, outlook, kind of, all those kind of things are nuances, but they're really important to make your brand resonate with people.
One of the especially when you've got people and got staff, one of the challenges is always I think around how business owners concern themselves perhaps with what staff do on social media as well.
Yes.
What sort of conversations do you have with business owners around that? Because staff presumably can support social media activity, but also can create a big risk as well.
Yeah, they can. They absolutely can. So it's a really good point to raise. So we, with a few of our clients where they have large large staffing numbers, we create employee comms and the main public comms. So we would send to them their employee comms for their employees to go out with, as though they've done that on their own social media to keep that brand alignment. And we'll give them a couple of points they're allowed to amend in that and nothing else. And then we'll do the public facing stuff from us that then allows those two things to be in synergy with each other. It's difficult because even down to things, we have staff, we have clients that have got staff as their admins on their pages, and it's quite a difficult conversation sometimes to have to say you might want to think about
taking that person off.
Yeah. Because for some people in a demographic of a certain customer, how something is grammatically correct, spelt properly, punctuated properly, for whatever reason, can impact their view of how professional an organisation is. And it's not necessarily the person's fault that's done it. They haven't done it with any intention, but it can have quite a big impact on clients, as can inappropriate posting, as can sharing of content that someone's not checked first, and they can be catastrophic. Yeah.
What you must come across lots of examples of content out there. What do you think makes for really good social media content? What sort of things do you like? Do you like to see? You think, oh, that's great, or that's?
Yeah, I think personality is important. If you are a business that has a personality, then there is absolutely no reason why you ought not to be sharing that personality. A lot of businesses in there strive to look too professional, look a bit cold, a bit too corporate. And if you're a corporate, that might be great, but a bit too corporate. So people like to see a bit of a chink in the armour sometimes. They like to see the person that they're going to deal with because they want to feel like they know them. So they want to know what to expect. So I think that's, some of the stuff that I like that I see that has a little bit of a dig at themselves. It's quite playful in that sense. I think the other part about it is people sell too much. They bombard and sell too much. So a good set of educational posts, things that make plain to a client why they might want to deal with you, the approach they're going to get, what experience they ought to expect, where's your skill from? Why should they trust it? What's your product? What's the background to it? Why are you so committed to it? You are technically selling to a client, but you're not doing it in a very overt, buy my stuff kind of way. And the ones that I can't abide are the fear ones, the tactics of, if you don't buy this, this will happen. It's like,
I've come across some great examples of that. I won't push the time, but yeah, we've got a couple of good questions here actually that have popped up on the chat. So I'm going to just ask you these quickly. This is a really good one. What about if you've got a business that services a kind of local space, but also you have customers in other areas geographically as well? So your kind of physical location is based in Lancaster in this example, but you've also kind of remotely delivered clients around the world. What customers might have different needs, how do you kind of manage that in terms of a content strategy?
Yeah, okay, so I'm assuming when we talk about that, we're talking about kind of how do you communicate with those particular clients potentially.
Yeah,
I think it's education. So it is around how do we service our client and how can we help you. You might, there are some things you can do on your social media which allow those posts only to be seen by the demographic that you are intending them to be seen.
Right.
So if, for example, you're based in Morecambe, but your post particularly is about your office in Basingstoke and it's reliant only on, I don't know, your male set of customers seeing it above a certain age, you can make amendments to make sure that it's only shown to the male customers above a certain age in Basingstoke. So not everybody sees the same content, and that can be done via your news feeds. So you can do those things, just people don't necessarily know how to do those things.
And but you do that organically, or is that paid function?
You do that organically.
Right.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, absolutely. And of course, you mentioned paid. You could do paid content, but I think it's not a problem for people to see that you service more than one area. I don't think that's an issue at all. I think as long as you educate how you do it, and that there is no dip in the service delivery. But I think if people are talking about using the word target, then I'm assuming that is more of a ads type campaign or demographic targeting. And if it is, then you need to do some specific strategy approach by way of advertising, which allows you to choose them by demographic and location. And one of the best platforms to do that is Facebook. Google might suggest it does it, but Google Ads is incredibly expensive and often a race to the bottom. So, yeah.
Okay. And the other question that's come up is a good one. What type of content has the potential to go viral? How do I get my content to go viral?
So the first thing would be make sure it's positive viral content. I know that sounds obvious, but yeah. And sometimes it's very funny, but it might do you brand damage depending on who gets to see it. So often they are the fun ones, they're the outtakes and the things that go wrong. They are the aspects of, or they are transformation posts. So they're not necessarily about. So you can have that thing about you and you can poke a little bit of fun, but then you can do things where you let the client speak on your behalf. There's nothing better than a client experience to add credibility to that, with a little bit of clever editing, with some good footage. Absolutely. You just got to be very mindful that whoever's on the receiving end of that sees it in as positive light as it's been intended, and there are times when that maybe doesn't go according to plan. So
I suppose that's kind of the viral thing is kind of I suppose, especially if you're an early stage startup, everybody wants viral content. Everybody wants content that's going to reach a bigger audience. But how else can you effectively reach a bigger or the right audience?
If you want to reach an effective bigger audience, and it's not about going viral, it's about targeting and it's about investing in reaching that audience. So you would be doing that through some kind of a paid strategy. But go back to the point where you say, if you just started out, what are the things that people are, and it's happening a lot at the moment. So one thing that I would guard against so passionately is this, can everybody in my community on my page go to their friends page and can go to community tab and can you invite all your mates to like my pages and stuff? Don't, because you'll suddenly wake up next day and you've got 200 more likes, and you're a butcher in Bolton Sands, and your mate who's a mate of a mate, 200 of them are in Essex, and they're never going to buy anything from you. So it's a false scenario in terms of, it's not just about the likes, it's about the engagement. So if you're going to go for a strategy, go for an engagement strategy, not for a likes strategy. So people do some things because they feel that they're doing them from kindness, and they're not necessarily going to help. So you might go from having a page that's got, I don't know, 1,000 likes. The next day it's got 500 likes, but those 500 people didn't choose to engage with you. So your ratio of engagement on your page drops significantly, and actually as a result of that, Facebook will de-rank your content. So actually your original 1,000 members or followers don't get to see as much of it as they did the day before either. So you've not just done damage in that sense, you've done damage that you then need to try and recover later. So it should be paid content. The other part about that is people rush to do this stuff, and I would perhaps suggest that you look at your pages and you look at whether or not someone could spend 10 minutes on your page. If you could spend 10 minutes on your page without reading the same content twice, you're probably ready to do some paid adverts.
That's an interesting point.
Because you're going to pay an amount of money to bring them to look at something, and it's not finished. Or it's finished, but it's not fully optimized. And people take a while to be able to be convinced that they are whoever you are whoever they want to give the money to. So a lot of it is about use of language. Have you aimed it at the client? Have you aimed it properly at the client? Is it about what we do rather than what you get? And have you taken the time to optimize things, put information in, write notes, do links, put good gallery shots on, you have some professional photographs done, and all those things that if you were walking down Bond Street and you just paid a fortune for a shop front, you wouldn't leave the windows empty, you wouldn't not put signage outside, and you certainly wouldn't lock the door and just wave from your customers from the inside. But because it's on Facebook and because it's free, that's what they do in some cases.
It's a great point.
Facebook have given you one of the most valuable bits of retail estate, and your shop's probably got about that much in it. As an example. Not everybody, but some people.
I've spoken to people like this in the past. If you want, especially when you want to sell a big ticket item, but you're expecting that a Facebook post or a LinkedIn post is going to be the thing that brings you that potential customer. It doesn't quite work like that, does it?
No. And video content, Dan. So go back to that point around. Have you asked your audience? Has anybody asked them what they want to see? Have they asked what they will find helpful? So have you gone out there and said, I'd really like your help? People love getting involved in a cause. They love feeling that they're part of a journey. So it would be going, if you feel comfortable to do it, ask the people that you're trying to engage with, and they will, they're the ones that have got the answer. So asking your audience.
A great point. A great idea to engage your customers, isn't it? A great way to kind of to build your business that way. Ruth, we're coming towards the end now, so I've got a kind of a closing, a final question for you. Thanks for the insight on social media. What I want to kind of ask is, there's probably a few people here, hopefully a few people who will watch, who are thinking of starting out in business. What's your kind of your piece of advice for your one piece of advice for anyone who's thinking of starting their own digital business?
I think just digital business or business in general, I think it's that it doesn't happen overnight, and that's not mean to sound like a bit of I'm giving a poor message here, but it doesn't. So all that research work that you do now, all that polling of potential customers, all of the planning that you do, writing your own business plan, as arduous as a task you think it is, it might be only you that reads it, but you become your own critic and you start to be able to see where the gaps might be and the spaces might be. So I think a lot of the time, Dan, it's actually about all that prep work you do before you open your doors, and then also before you open the doors, will your business be able to function on its worst day ever? So rather than looking at, I've got all the customers I want and the revenues are coming in, everything's great. I mean, that would be fabulous for everybody. Of course it would. but actually, can I manage if I have a bad month? Will my business, have I gone conservative in forecast, or have I gone very optimistic in forecast? And it's not about wanting to make it sound like it's a risk task, but it's more of a, because when it does get a bit rocky, if you've done that bit of work and you've convinced yourself, you just put your tin hat on and carry on going. If you haven't, you could have a bit of a wobble. And when it comes to being specifically around digital, it's about the upskill. It's about the continual professional development. It's about keeping yourself at the front of your game. You can go to sleep, at 9 o'clock on a Thursday night and you wake up the next day and the social world is completely changed. So, your skills are as good and as high as they were, an hour ago, but it's not an industry where you can learn something and just stay with that learned skill and knowledge. So in your plan, build some time for being able to come out of your business, to be able to do that, to be able to come back in again. Otherwise, you're just trying to catch up all the time.
Brilliant. Thanks, Ruth. Is anybody, anyone who's logged into the Zoom, any questions there? I've got the Facebook in front of me as well, live. So if anyone's got any questions, any final questions? As a start with very little capital, what stage should I invest in branding, expert professional marketing to help? Good question.
As soon as it's affordable to you, and that's about creating the image of a business you want to have, and you want other people to believe in that you've got. So, and it's often not as expensive as or it can be done more economically than sometimes it is done. I think there's this kind of idea that it's going to cost an absolute fortune. I think uniformity of brand is key. Branding and marketing kind of get bunched in together, but they're not necessarily. So, branding and what you're trying to communicate and how, and making sure that's all uniformed is really important. And then probably sitting down with somebody like me or like you, Dan, or whoever else is in our industry. Most of us give a free hour of our time to help somebody to get their understanding, and sitting with them to say, well, let me challenge you on what it is you're trying to deliver and how would that go into a market. And it gives them enough to go away and think about, are there some of those things they can do themselves without much of an outlay? And normally there is. Normally there's enough that they can do in the meantime. But I would say engaging with somebody who is a professional in that arena is one of the first things you should do, rather than waiting until you've got the money, because actually that might be the reason why you are waiting to get the money, is that it's not being done.
I'm going to echo that, Ruth. I think that the businesses that I see that do well are always those who kind of just get the brand on point. That kind of uniformity and consistency, and less about being here and being here and being here and being here, but more about where you are, the channels that you do choose after you've done that, as you described before, that work up front, that you make sure that the picture on each of those channels is consistent, it's on
every time.
Quality. Totally agree with that. And I'm going to ask for any more questions, but I don't seem to have any going through, so I'm going to kind of just give that quick nod to the rest of the Array Festival before I kind of wrap up and say I hope you all can look for some of the other talks that are coming up. There's some great stuff over the next 3 weeks through to the end of May, so please follow the page. Please sign up for some more of the talks, and let's spread the message of how great Lancaster and Morecambe is a place to do business. Ruth, I'm absolutely thrilled with the chat we've just had. I think it's been a lot of fun, and some great sound bites that I take away from that. The importance of building relationships with customers, internal, external, but just your ability to build relationships. I love the idea of interviewing the customer. I think that's we all should be doing that, I think, as a matter of course. And I really love, from a sense of business planning, and something that I wish I'd have kind of done once before, is thinking about what, the great months is. We've all got the tendency to think about what a great month would look like, but what would a really tough month look like, and how do we make it through the really tough months? So thank you so much for some really insightful information, some great conversation, and all the best for with business and coming back out of lockdown and how that might look. So
thank you. And I would encourage anyone else that's watching is to have a look at that list of fantastic speakers that Dan has lined up. There are some brilliant, really informative, really educational people to listen to that would be a help to anybody just to increase their knowledge and skill in business. So thank you, Dan, for arranging it.
No, brilliant. It's been great. Thank you. And I will finish there. Thanks very much. Take care,
Thank
everybody.
you.